Hey there and welcome. If you're gearing up for your NISM certification or you just want to get a real look under the hood at how professional portfolios are actually built, you've come to the right place. We are going to break down the entire portfolio construction process piece by piece using the official syllabus as our guide. Okay, let's jump right in.
So, think of this whole process like building a house. First, we've got to lay the foundation, and that's the single most important decision, asset allocation. Then we'll draw out the blueprints. That's the formal process and what's called the investment policy statement. After that, we need to know who we're building for, right? So we'll get to know the investor's goals and their personality. With all that in hand, we can actually build the structure using a clear strategy. And finally, you have to do maintenance to keep the house standing strong, and that's portfolio rebalancing.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the asset allocation decision. And I really mean this, forget trying to find the next hot stock. Seriously, decades of research and professional experience all point to the same thing. This one decision, how you spread your money across different asset types, is going to have a way bigger impact on your long-term results than anything else you do. This is the bedrock. So, what are we talking about exactly? Well, asset allocation is just the big picture, strategic decision of how you divide your money among major categories. Things like stocks, bonds, and cash. It's about focusing on the whole forest, not getting lost trying to pick the perfect individual tree. Picking that hot stock gets all the attention, but getting this mix right, that's what really truly drives performance over time. Okay, so to build that mix in a smart way, we need a key tool from the world of statistics: correlation. It sounds fancy, but all it does is measure how two different investments move in relation to each other. The scale is super simple. It just goes from +1 to -1. If two things have a correlation of +1, they move in perfect lockstep. Think two big airline stocks. But if they have a correlation of -1, they move in completely opposite directions, kind of like two ends of a seesaw.
And this is precisely why correlation is so powerful for managing risk. I mean, think about it. If all your investments are positively correlated, say you own a bunch of tech stocks, they're probably all going to fall together when the market takes a hit. But if you combine assets that have low or even negative correlation, one might be going up while the other is going down, and that helps smooth out the ride for your whole portfolio. That's the magic of diversification right there.
So, we've got the core idea. Use correlation to build a diversified portfolio. But how do the pros actually do this in the real world? Well, that brings us to Section 2, where we build the framework for success. This is where we go from theory to a formal, disciplined process, and we create the rule book for every single decision.
Now, this isn't a one-and-done kind of deal. It's a constant loop. It all kicks off with developing the master plan, what we call the Investment Policy Statement, or IPS. Next, you have to study the current market landscape and make some forecasts. Armed with that knowledge, you then construct a portfolio. And finally, and this is key, you have to measure and evaluate how it's doing. That feedback flows right back to the beginning, and the cycle starts all over again. It's a dynamic process of planning, doing, and then refining.
Right at the heart of this entire process is that document I just mentioned, the IPS. I want you to think of the investment policy statement as the constitution for the portfolio. It is the written document that clearly spells out the investor's goals, their limits, their risk tolerance, everything. It becomes the North Star for every single decision that gets made from that point on.
So why is this piece of paper so important? Because it helps prevent all the common mistakes people make with their money. For one, it forces everybody to be realistic about returns right from the start. It also prevents emotional panic selling when the market gets rocky because you have a plan to stick to. It creates a clear benchmark so you can actually judge how well your manager is doing. And maybe most importantly, it protects you, the investor, from being sold something you don't need. It just creates discipline for everyone involved.
Okay, so we've established that the IPS is like a constitution. But a constitution is just an empty document until you fill it with specific laws. So, in Section 3, we're going to define those laws. We're going to fill the IPS with the investor's specific goals and their real-world limitations. So when it comes to what an investor actually wants, it usually boils down to one of three things. First, are they focused on preservation of capital? This is someone who's basically saying, rule number 1, don't lose my money. Think about retirees, or maybe someone saving for a down payment. Second, is the goal regular income? This investor needs their portfolio to spin off cash, maybe to help pay the bills. And finally, is it capital appreciation? This is all about growth. It's for the person trying to seriously increase the value of their portfolio over the long haul. And yeah, that means taking on more risk. Now, along with those goals, we have to deal with real-world limits, or what we call constraints. Liquidity is a huge one. What if the investor needs to get their hands on a big chunk of cash for an emergency? We have to plan for that. Then there are regulatory constraints, legal limits on what you can and can't do. And finally, and this one's a biggie, taxes. Because remember, it's not about what you make, it's about what you get to keep. So the portfolio has to be built in a tax-smart way right from day one.
And now for Section 4. This is where things get really personal. We're moving beyond just the numbers and the rules, and we're digging into the psychology of the investor. Because it's not enough to know the rules of the game, you absolutely have to understand the player. Now this might look a little complicated, but don't worry about the details here. This is a classic model for understanding investor psychology. The key takeaway is that it maps out an investor's personality along two simple lines. Are they generally confident or anxious? And are they generally careful, or are they a bit impulsive? Where they land on this chart tells us a ton about how they're likely to act, especially when things get stressful.
And that model gives us 5 pretty distinct investor personalities. You've got the adventurer, they're confident and impulsive, willing to take some big swings. There's the celebrity, who's anxious but impulsive, they tend to chase the latest hot trend. Then you have the guardian, who is super careful and anxious, all about protecting what they have. The individualist is careful and confident, they do their own homework. And finally, the straight arrow is kind of a balanced mix of everything, right in the middle. You can see how each of these types would need a very different approach.
So beyond just personality, an investor's stage of life is absolutely critical. This chart here shows the typical investing life cycle. And really, the core idea is super simple. As people get older, their financial situation and their ability to take risks change, and they change dramatically. A 25-year-old and a 65-year-old should have completely different portfolios, and this is the reason why.
This journey usually has 4 key stages. You start in the accumulation phase. You're young, you have a long time horizon, and you can really focus on growth. Then you move into the consolidation phase in your mid-career. Your earnings are higher, and you start to balance that growth with preserving what you've built. The spending phase is retirement. Now the focus totally shifts to generating income to live on. And finally, there's the gifting phase, which is all about legacy and planning for the next generation. Okay, so we've defined the rules of the game, and we understand the player. Now, in Section 5, it's finally time to actually play the game. This is where we take all of that information, the objectives, the constraints, the personality type, the life stage, and we use it to build the actual investment strategy.
And this is a really critical distinction to understand. You have strategic asset allocation, or SAA. This is your long-term baseline portfolio mix. This is what's written down in the IPS. Then you have tactical asset allocation, or TAA. This is when you make short-term, temporary shifts away from that strategic mix because you think you can capitalize on a market opportunity. The easy way to remember it is that SAA is about time in the market, while TAA is about timing the market. So you've got your long-term strategy and your short-term tactics. Which one matters more? Well, the evidence on this is absolutely overwhelming. Landmark studies, repeated over decades, have all found the same thing. Your strategic asset allocation, that boring long-term policy mix, is responsible for over 90% of your portfolio's long-term results. All that other stuff, the market timing, the hot stock picking, it's basically just noise around the edges. The single most important thing you can possibly do is get the big picture right from the start. And that brings us to our final section, portfolio rebalancing. See, building the portfolio isn't a one-time event. You can't just set it and forget it. It's more like a living thing that needs regular checkups and maintenance to make sure it stays aligned with your original plan. So why is this so important? Well, just think about it. Let's say you start with a simple 60-40 mix of stocks and bonds. If stocks have a great year, your portfolio might drift to become 70-30 all on its own. Now, without you even realizing it, you're taking on way more risk than you originally signed up for in your IPS. The market will always be pulling your portfolio away from its target. Rebalancing is how you pull it back. But I have to be honest, rebalancing isn't always easy. It involves a very clear trade-off. The benefits, they're huge. It keeps your risk level in check, it keeps you true to your original strategy, and it forces you to do what we all know we should do, buy low and sell high. But there are real difficulties. It can trigger transaction costs and taxes, and it can be really tough to do with things that are hard to sell, like real estate. So there you have it, the complete systematic blueprint for how professionals build portfolios, from that first big asset allocation decision all the way through to the ongoing maintenance.
It's a journey that starts with understanding the markets, but really, it ends with understanding yourself. And that leads to a final thought for you. Looking at that list of personalities again, the adventurer, the celebrity, the guardian, the individualist, or the straight arrow, which one truly reflects how you approach your own financial life?